I wouldn't mind, Paul, to just do that with you right now so people can have it immediately. You may be familiar with it because I worked with you on a project in Florida some years ago. But I'm going to ask, talking to your viewers, I'm going to ask Paul a series of questions that you can then do with your colleagues in a group discussion. It never goes as sort of quickly as I'm going to do it with Paul, because everyone tells a story. Maybe Paul will too. But this passion exercise will get at your deepest passions, which are not unimportant when you talk about the value of your museum. You work in your museum for a reason. Museums are really good at talking about the what and the how, especially the how. They're really bad at talking about the why. So we're going to get at the why with this exercise, and it's just a really valuable exercise for you to get to know your colleagues, talking to all of you. So Paul, what is it about your work with museums that is most important to you?
I think the most important thing to me about my work is sharing things with other people that either they didn't know before, or to share things in a way that really do change people, that is something that sticks with someone for whatever reason, that resonates with people. So I think those two things are really important to me about my work, and that make me interested in my work.
Right, so I need some clarification on who these people are before I ask the next question. So I'm modeling, seeking clarification. So you said sharing with people. Who are these people?
So if I'm thinking about my museum work and my exhibit work, the people who actually come to experience and participate in the exhibits.
Oh, like the people from the community, the visitors,
community members, whoever's coming to see the exhibition.
Oh, so I'm really glad I asked you, because I thought you meant museum staff, because I know that when you work with staff, you pass along some really great wisdom that you've collected over the years.
Hopefully the museum staff enjoy and find out new things and have takeaways that are meaningful to them about the exhibits also, of course.
Right.
But I was thinking primarily of visitors, people who actually outside of the museum who experience and interact with the exhibits.
So why is that important to you?
So I think why it's important to me is that I really believe that if I can't be passionate, if I often think I need to be able to fall in love with a project. Like, I might not know anything about, like, I'm working on a canal museum project now. I didn't know anything about this, but then I realized, wow, this is actually legitimately interesting to me, and I'm thinking about all the connections and stuff, and so I want to share. You use the word passion, enthusiasm, this excitement. And I really believe that if I can't be sincerely excited, enthusiastic about something that I'm putting together, exhibit experiences, like, why in the world do I think visitors will be excited or interested in it? And I say that, so that's what motivates me. But I also say that as a museum professional, when I go and see an exhibit, and if I don't think it is as successful as it might be, it is almost never, and maybe it is never, that I think, well, this was just a bad idea. This subject, you couldn't do a good exhibit on. I don't think that. I just think, somewhere the implementation, something went off the track somewhere. Like, this could be an interesting exhibit. This could be an exciting, this could be a useful and memorable experience for community members, but something fell off the track there.
Yeah, so this is how Paul answered the question is a really good example how stories end up being told, which is a good thing. And just as an aside, who knew canals were so interesting?
Yeah, they're super interesting.
Right?
Let me just tell you that the D&H Canal was responsible for so many things in New York City that we take for granted now, like the Brooklyn Bridge and architecture and social aspects, so many things. But that canal now is a distant memory. It doesn't exist really.
Right.
And so, it's not like somebody who's driving over the Brooklyn Bridge now thinks to themselves, wow, thank goodness for John Roebling and the D&H Canal and Rosendale Cement. But really, people who come to that museum will know those things.
Yeah. So I had asked you, well, why is that important? And you started telling stories about things, about topics that surprised you, and you became enthusiastic, right? And you think that then those who see this exhibit will feel your enthusiasm. So why is that important?
I knew you were going to ask that. And what I think of immediately is I think there is something innate in humans. You use the word stories, but I'll also use the word sharing, that, you see something that is so compelling, you want to share it with somebody. Oh, come here and look at that bird. You could be outside. Or, people share things, they post and repost things now online because they think they're funny, or you send something to somebody via email because, wow, this made me think of you. I thought you would enjoy this. And so I think there is that sort of interest in sharing and communicating and that. So, if I think about people in a museum, like maybe this is a different way to judge success. If somebody, is this an exhibit that somebody's going to call over somebody in their group and say, hey, come over here and look at this. This is awesome. This is so cool. No, come and see it now, And so that's why it's important.
So why is that important, this notion of sharing, as you described it?
So I think, and this again fits into my bias about museums. I think, museums aren't just about stuff. There is an important social function and gathering function that is fundamental to museums. Because if it is just about stuff, show me a video online, but it's a much different experience. When I was a kid and I visited Washington, D.C. for the first time with my family and actually stood inside the Lincoln Memorial, who knows how many images I had seen of that before as a kid in school books, on the back of $5 bills, and, on TV. But wow, when you're standing there in front of that giant statue that, French is the sculptor, there was just something very different about being there in the presence of other people and seeing that. And I think that's true of museums and other important gathering places. Why do people congregate in places? They want a shared experience. That could be at a mosque, that could be at a memorial, that could be at a restaurant, that could be at a concert, that could also be at a museum or a sporting event, what have you.
But what is the distinct quality? I'm now going off script because I'm now curious. I'm telling you folks. What is the distinct quality that a museum might have that might make that sharing unique? I want to tie it back to sharing to get it sort of the essence of your passion.
So I think when we get into that use of the word unique is, what are the stories and the objects and the materials that are specific to this place, this time that's being interpreted, this story. The D&H Canal functioned in one particular place in the world. I mean, it wouldn't make sense. I suppose you could have the D&H Canal Museum the D&H Canal was associated with upstate New York. I can't imagine that it would be useful or interesting to have the D&H Canal Museum in Las Vegas. Like, it wouldn't pass the who cares test. Like, who cares? But now, if I am in the place where this historical transportation system functioned, like literally outside the building that I'm standing in now, okay, now that's a different experience. Again, I'm in its presence, or I'm in its former presence.
Okay, so there's a connection between place and what's in that place and the history of that place and sharing.
Could be, but then again, if I think of, you think of a famous painting, the Mona Lisa, Van Gogh's Starry Night, Edward Hopper's Nighthawks. Those are all like paintings that are memorable to me. And I've seen them all in person, so they have another feeling to me. But where I saw them didn't matter. If they moved the Mona Lisa now from the Louvre to the Vatican or the Metropolitan Museum of Art or the Great Pyramids, people would still want to see that painting. So that becomes sort of independent of place at that point. But something like the D&H Canal, that was site specific. That's different, and I suppose that's why there are. That's why you have historic houses in the places where the people live or the special events happen. There are some rare instances where a house might transcend time and space, like the weird historical Disneyland that is Greenfield Village in Dearborn, Michigan.
Right.
You want to see the Wright Brothers cycle shop? The one that they actually worked on in Ohio? Well, it's not there in Ohio. You go to Dearborn, Michigan, or you want to, all these other historic buildings that Henry Ford just sort of relocated to Dearborn in this quasi village.
So if I were analyzing your responses as data about your passion, there would be something about place-based experiences, sharing whatever it is you might be feeling in that place, looking at that thing with others. It's that sharing experience in that place. That's what I would take away in the analysis. So your passion is very connected to place and people, even though we're talking about a museum. So it's kind of interesting, right? So your
I think that's great, because then now, like you said, you've sort of given the high points of how this process would unfold and expand in a more extended way, in a more deliberate way.
And what happens when you do this with your colleagues in your museum? It's such a feel-good kind of thing, because what happens is, as you go around robin in groups of 5, that's how I usually do it, groups of 5, and it's usually your colleagues, and it's usually a board member in your group, it's usually a community member in your group, so it's an interdisciplinary group. All the educators do not sit together, all the curators do not sit together. Everyone has assigned seating, how I do it. Because if I left people to their own devices, what would they do? Sit with their friends, right? So we're trying to get people to know each other, to build that trust, to build open lines of communication. But what happens when people do this, The deepest passion is usually very similar across an organization. There may be like 3 or 4 deepest passions that are somehow connected to each other. And it's just a really great, feel-good kind of exercise to begin to get to know your colleagues. And you could, the purpose of having a community member in there, like a school principal or a teacher who uses your museum a lot, is to have a different viewpoint from a very different kind of person. And of course, having the board member there, the purpose behind that is so the board can begin to see the staff as passionate people, and they work there for a purpose.
Yeah, not just worker bees or drones carrying out the functions of the higher ups. So yeah.
Right. So intentional practice, which we didn't really talk about, is there's a strong purpose behind everything that you do. And to me, museums need to be purposeful organizations if they're going to be successful organizations, and they need to figure out what their purpose is. And the purpose is probably an evolving purpose.